If you care about serious history, the kind that doesn't just recount battles but explains how people actually stayed alive, then subscribe to this channel right now, because what we're about to cover is rarely taught properly. Today, we're diving into World War II's underground survival supply chains, not as romantic myths, but as functioning systems built under total occupation, aerial bombardment, and constant betrayal. These networks were not accidents. They were engineered, stress-tested, and in some cases, they never truly disappeared. Understanding how they worked gives you tools that still matter today, whether you're studying resistance history or thinking about real-world survival under pressure. During World War II, millions of civilians survived not because of armies, but because of invisible logistics. Food moved without receipts. Medicine travelled without labels. Information flowed without paper trails. These underground systems were built by people who assumed capture was inevitable and planned anyway. If you've ever wondered how entire cities endured starvation blockades, how resistance cells stayed supplied for years, or why some modern black market routes mirror wartime paths almost exactly, this episode is for you. Why underground supply chains mattered more than weapons in occupied Europe. In occupied territories, survival was a logistical problem before it was a military one. The German war economy relied on rationing, confiscation, and centralized distribution. Underground networks emerged because official systems were designed to starve resistance out of existence. In Poland, France, the Netherlands, Yugoslavia and Greece, illegal supply chains replaced state logistics entirely. The Polish underground state, coordinated through the Polish Home Army, operated clandestine bakeries, slaughterhouses and medical depots while running schools and courts. This wasn't chaos, it was parallel governance. What made these networks effective was redundancy. No single supplier knew the whole chain. Food moved in fragments. Medicine was broken into components. One person transported salt, another yeast, another flour, all converging only at the last possible moment. The lesson here is clear and still applicable. If you centralize your survival resources, you make them fragile. Distributed systems survive pressure. So, let's talk about how resistance logistics hid in plain sight by cleverly using everyday professions. You see, the most successful underground supply chains, well, they disguise themselves as just normal economic activity. Railway workers would, quite ingeniously, divert cargo. Postal clerks found ways to reroute parcels. Undertakers, believe it or not, transported medical supplies inside coffins. Farmers, on their part, overstated livestock deaths to hide meat distribution. Over in France and Belgium, escape lines like the Comet Line relied on civilians whose day jobs provided the perfect cover. Shepherds guided downed airmen across borders, while tailors hid maps in clothing seams. Even shopkeepers got involved, running dual inventories, one legal and one, well, completely invisible. The practical takeaway here is that, honestly, effective covert logistics don't really look heroic at all. They look, well, rather boring. The more ordinary your cover activity, the safer your operation tends to be. For modern survivalists, this really means blending preparedness into your daily life, rather than, advertising it. And actually, skills that appear mundane are often the most resilient. Now, moving on to how Allied intelligence formalized underground supply networks. By 1941, the Allies realized that resistance movements truly lived or died by logistics. Britain's Special Operations Executive was created specifically to arm, fund and supply these underground movements. But the most important contribution wasn't, in fact, weapons. It was systems. Things like standardized drop containers, interchangeable radio parts, falsified ration cards and medical kits designed to be broken down and hidden separately. Agents were trained to think like quartermasters, not soldiers. They learned how to calculate food requirements for safe houses, how to rotate supplies to avoid detection, and how to destroy evidence in seconds. These principles are, well, timeless. Any long-term survival plan must include rotation, concealment, and rapid disposal. Stockpiling without a system is just hoarding. How these supply routes survived the war and quietly evolved is honestly fascinating. When the war ended, the people didn't disappear. Routes used to smuggle Jews, pilots and resistance fighters became pathways for refugees, contraband and later Cold War intelligence. In Eastern Europe, wartime black markets slid seamlessly into post-war survival economies under communist shortages. In the Balkans, mountain routes established during resistance operations are still used today. Even humanitarian organizations unknowingly inherited these systems. Modern aid corridors often follow Second World War-era clandestine paths because, well, geography hasn't changed. The people who knew how to move goods quietly passed that knowledge down. This continuity is why studying these networks isn't just academic. You're looking at living infrastructure. What serious historians and survivalists can apply right now? First, study logistics before tactics. The underground won endurance battles because they prioritized food, medicine and information flow. Second, design redundancy. Never rely on a single supplier, location or route. Third, embed systems inside normal life. The safest operations are indistinguishable from routine behavior. Finally, document knowledge in fragments. The resistance survived interrogation because no one held the full picture. If you're researching history, look beyond battles and study ration cards, transport records and civilian testimony. If you're a survivalist, stop thinking in terms of bunkers and start thinking in terms of networks. Survival has always been social, logistical and adaptive. WWII's underground supply chains weren't just acts of defiance, they were masterclasses in resilience under total surveillance. They remind us that survival isn't about stockpiles alone. It's about systems that can bend without breaking. If this kind of deep, serious history matters to you, subscribe to the channel, share this episode with fellow researchers and survival-minded friends, and keep this knowledge alive. These networks survived once. Understanding them ensures they're never forgotten.